Stella didn't know his name when she pressed her hands to his chest. She only knew he was dying. The gurney exploded through the ER doors at 2:47 a.m., propelled by two paramedics who looked like they'd seen something they couldn't unsee. Blood soaked through the white sheets in spreading crimson maps. The man's face was a canvas of violence, left eye swollen shut, jaw bruised, dark purple, a gash across his temple still weeping red. Male, early 30s, multiple stab wounds to the torso, significant blood loss. The paramedic's voice clipped short as the monitor shrieked. Stella was already moving. "Trauma 2, Dr. Reeves barked, but Stella was 3 steps ahead, snapping on gloves as she ran alongside the gurney. Her sneakers squeaked against linoleum still wet from the last emergency. The room erupted into controlled chaos. Voices overlapped, vitals shouted, orders given, the mechanical hiss of oxygen. Stella's hands found the man's wrist, feeling for a pulse that kept disappearing. Thready, weak, stubborn. BP's dropping 80/40. "Get me 2 units ONEG, now!" Stella threaded the IV into a vein that kept collapsing, her fingers steady even as the monitor screamed its warnings. The man's chest rose and fell in shallow, irregular gasps. His skin had that gray pallor she'd learned to recognize the color of someone standing at death's door, deciding whether to knock. "Stay with me," she said, her voice cutting through the noise with practiced calm. That's when his eyes opened. Not fluttering, not confused, just open. Dark eyes, almost black in the harsh fluorescent light, focused directly on her face, with an intensity that didn't belong to someone dying. Most patients in his condition were incoherent, panicked, or unconscious. This man looked at her like he was cataloging every detail, like he was memorizing her. The monitor beeped its frantic rhythm, but those eyes stayed locked on hers for 3 impossible seconds before sliding shut again. Stella's hands didn't pause, but something cold traced down her spine. "That's not normal." "Stella, I need pressure on that bleeder." She was already there, pressing gauze to the wound on his side. Blood welled warm against her palms. Too much blood. The kind of blood loss that should have left him unconscious 10 minutes ago. Dr. Reeves worked with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, calling out orders Stella anticipated before he finished them. She was good at this, the organized chaos, the split-second decisions, the dark humor that kept the weight of it all from crushing her. Though, if this guy dies on my shift after making creepy eye contact, I'm definitely haunted, she thought, adjusting the pressure. Great. Haunted by a patient who probably has terrible Yelp reviews. "Vitals stabilizing," someone called out. Stella glanced at the monitor. Heart rate still elevated but steadying, BP climbing slowly back toward survivable. She'd seen worse patients code on the table, yet this man clung to life with what felt like sheer force of will. Dr. Reeves stepped back, peeling off his gloves. "Get him to surgery. Stella, stay with him until they're ready." The room cleared with the efficient speed of an ER that never stopped moving. Suddenly, it was just Stella and the monitors and the man on the gurney, whose breathing had evened into something almost peaceful. She checked his vitals again, more out of habit than necessity. Strong pulse now, steady rhythm. He'd survived the worst of it. Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. Let's see how far Stella and Bruno's story travel. Now, let's continue. Her eyes drifted to his hands, resting against the white sheets. Strong hands, scarred knuckles, a silver ring on his right hand that looked expensive. Not a wedding band. His forearms were marked with intricate tattoos that disappeared beneath the hospital gown. One looked like script in a language she didn't recognize. Everything about him whispered money and danger in equal measure. "Who are you?" she wondered, studying his face now that she could actually look at him. Even battered, there was something striking about his features, strong jaw, dark hair, the kind of face that belonged on a movie screen rather than an ER gurney. His eyes opened again. This time, they focused immediately, No confusion, no disorientation, just that same unsettling awareness. "Hey," Stella said softly, leaning into his line of sight. "You're in the hospital. You're going to be okay." He didn't speak, didn't move, just watched her with an expression she couldn't read, something between gratitude and calculation. "Can you tell me your name?" she asked. His lips parted slightly, but no sound came. His gaze drifted to her badge, then back to her face. "Stella," he said, his voice barely more than a rasp. Her name. He'd read her name and spoken it like it meant something. "That's me," she confirmed, keeping her tone light despite the strange flutter in her chest. "And you are?" Before he could answer, if he was even going to answer, the ER doors opened. Stella looked up. 2 men entered, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. They wore dark suits that cost more than her monthly rent, moved with the kind of precision that came from training, not chance. One had silver at his temples and a face carved from stone. The other was younger, scanning the room with eyes that missed nothing. They didn't look at the reception desk, didn't check in with security. They walked straight toward her. "We're here for him," the older man said. Not asked, stated. Stella stepped slightly in front of the gurney, her body language shifting into something protective before her brain caught up. "I'm sorry, visiting hours are—" "We're not visiting." The younger man's gaze slid past her to the man on the gurney, and something passed between them, some silent communication that made Stella's instincts scream. "I need a name for the patient records," she said, keeping her voice steady. The older man's expression didn't change. "You don't." The man on the gurney, her patient, the one whose life she'd just saved, met Stella's eyes one more time. Then he gave the smallest shake of his head. "Don't." The single word hung unspoken between them, but Stella heard it clearly. The men in suits positioned themselves on either side of the gurney like a wall. And Stella realized, with creeping certainty, that she'd just saved someone she probably shouldn't have. Stella had learned to read patients the way some people read books. The panicked ones talked too much, the guilty ones avoided eye contact, the ones in real pain went quiet, turning inward where the hurt lived. The man in room 12 did none of these things. He watched. Stella noticed it on her second check of his vitals, 3 hours after surgery. Most post-op patients were groggy, disoriented, asking where they were or what happened. This man tracked her movements from the moment she entered, his dark eyes following her hands as she adjusted his IV, checked his drainage tubes, noted his stats on the tablet. "Pain level?" she asked, pen poised. "Manageable." His voice was rough from intubation but steady, controlled. Like he'd compartmentalized the knife wounds, the blood loss, the near-death experience into something he could simply file away. On a scale of 1 to 10, 4. Stella's eyes flicked to the monitor. His heart rate said otherwise. "Your vitals suggest 6 or 7. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Then I'm a 4 who doesn't complain." "Great. A stoic," Stella thought, making a note. "My favorite kind of difficult." She reached for his wrist to check his pulse manually, a habit from nursing school that technology hadn't broken, and his hand turned slightly, almost reflexively, before he stopped himself. Like he'd been about to grab her. Their eyes met. "Sorry," he said, though he didn't sound sorry. "Instinct." "Instinct to do what?" "Protect myself." Stella released his wrist, stepping back slightly. "I'm just checking your pulse, not attacking you." "I know." But he watched her hands anyway. She finished her notes in silence, hyper-aware of his gaze, tracking every movement. When she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "Stella." She froze. She hadn't introduced herself this time, hadn't said her name since the ER. "How do you—" "Your badge," he said simply. "Last night." "I remember." Most people didn't remember anything from trauma. The brain wiped those memories clean, a mercy against the weight of almost dying. This man remembered her name. Definitely haunted, Stella decided, keeping her expression neutral. Well, you've got a good memory for someone who coded twice. I remember what matters. The way he said it made her pause at the door, but she didn't turn around. Didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing that his words had landed somewhere they shouldn't have. By her third visit, the changes had started. Subtle at first. A different security guard on the floor, older, sharper-eyed, the kind who stood like he'd done this professionally somewhere that mattered. Then a second guard appeared at the end of the hallway, positioned where he could see everyone who approached room 12. Stella noticed. She always noticed. VIP patient? She asked Marcus, one of the day shift nurses, as they passed in the hallway. Marcus shrugged. Must be. Admin's being weird about his chart. Won't let anyone in except assigned staff. Since when do we have assigned staff? Since this morning. Marcus lowered his voice. You, Dr. Reeves, and Chen. Nobody else. Stella glanced toward room 12. Through the small window in the door, she could see her patient sitting up in bed, looking at something on his phone. Even from this distance, his posture radiated control. What'd he do? Win the lottery? Or something, Marcus muttered, walking away. The men in suits returned that afternoon. Stella was adjusting the patient's pain medication when the older one from the ER appeared in the doorway. He didn't knock, just stood there, radiating authority that had nothing to do with hospital hierarchy. The patient's expression didn't change. Marco, the man called Marco, nodded once. We need to talk. Then, talk. Marco's eyes slid to Stella. Privately. The patient, because Stella still didn't have a name for him, met her gaze. She stays. Stella's hands stilled on the IV line. Actually, I should. Stay, he repeated, softer this time but no less absolute. It wasn't a request. Marco's jaw tightened, but he stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The Rossini family is making moves. They think you're weak right now. Let them think it. Dante wants to respond. Tell Dante to wait. The conversation continued in clipped, efficient sentences that revealed nothing and everything. Stella kept her eyes on the monitor, her hands busy with unnecessary adjustments, trying to look professional, while her brain catalogued every word. Rossini, Dante, respond. This wasn't business talk. This was something else. When Marco finally left, the silence in the room felt heavier. You didn't have to stay, the patient said. Stella turned, meeting his eyes. You told me to. And you always do what you're told? Only when it's medically relevant. She crossed her arms. Which that conversation wasn't. His expression shifted something that might have been respect. You're observant. Part of the job. Noticing when things don't add up. She gestured at the room. Like, whatever this is. This? Private security. Restricted access. Men in expensive suits having cryptic conversations about families and responses. Stella kept her tone light, conversational, even as her heart rate picked up. You're either very important or very dangerous. Can't I be both? That's not reassuring. It wasn't meant to be. They stared at each other across the sterile hospital room, and Stella felt the shift between them from nurse and patient to something more complicated. Something that made her want to walk out the door and never look back. But she didn't move. What's your name? She asked. He tilted his head slightly, considering, does it matter? I saved your life. I'd like to know whose life I saved. For a moment, she thought he might actually tell her. His mouth opened, and something flickered in his expression, something almost vulnerable. Then, voices erupted in the hallway. Stella moved toward the door on instinct, her hand on the handle when she heard it. 2 orderlies, their voices low but urgent just outside the room. Can't believe they let him in here. Do you know who that is? Everyone knows. That's Castelli. Stella's hand froze on the door handle. Castelli. The name hit her like cold water, and suddenly every strange detail clicked into horrifying place. The suits, the security, the way people moved around him like he was radioactive. She turned slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. The man in the bed watched her with those too aware eyes, and this time, he didn't look away. He'd been waiting for her to figure it out. Stella waited until her break to look him up. She sat in the staff lounge with her phone and a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, typing the name into the search bar with hands that wanted to shake but didn't. Bruno Castelli. The results loaded, and kept loading. News articles, court documents, photographs taken from a distance with telephoto lenses. Most were years old, carefully worded to avoid libel, but the pattern was unmistakable. Alleged crime boss. Suspected ties to organized crime. Investigation ongoing. One article from 3 years ago showed him leaving a courthouse, flanked by lawyers who probably cost more per hour than Stella made in a week. His expression in the photo was exactly the same as it had been in room 12, calm, controlled, untouchable. Another article detailed a restaurant bombing that killed 4 people. Bruno Castelli's name appeared 6 times, always preceded by alleged or suspected. No convictions, no arrests that stuck, just a trail of violence that followed his name like a shadow. Stella's coffee cup clattered against the table when she set it down. "You okay?" Chen asked, glancing up from her tablet. "Yeah, fine." Stella's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Just tired." She wasn't tired. She was calculating. The man she'd saved, the man whose blood she'd had on her hands, whose pulse she'd fought to stabilize, ran half the city's criminal empire. And she'd touched him, spoken to him, stood in a room while his people discussed strategy. "You're observant," he'd said. She'd thought it was a compliment. Now it felt like a warning. Stella waited until the end of her shift to go back to room 12. The hallway was quieter at this hour, most of the day staff gone, the night crew scattered across the floor. The security guard nodded at her recognition, not permission, and she wondered when that distinction had started to matter. Bruno was awake. Of course he was. He sat propped against pillows, reading something on a tablet that he set aside the moment she entered. No surprise on his face, like he'd been expecting her. Stella closed the door behind her and stayed there, keeping the exit within reach. "Castelli," she said. Not a question. "Yes?" No hesitation, no attempt to deflect or deny, just one word that confirmed everything. Stella's jaw tightened. "You could have told me." "When? While you were saving my life?" He tilted his head slightly. "That seemed like poor timing. How about the 12 times I've checked on you since then?" "And say what? Thank you for the excellent care, by the way, I'm a criminal?" Something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. That felt presumptuous. "Presumptuous?" Stella's laugh came out sharp. "That's your concern? Presumption. You're angry. She stopped herself, breathing through the spike of adrenaline. "I'm a nurse. I save lives. That's what I do. I don't ask who they are or what they've done because it doesn't matter in the ER. But you. I'm different. You run the goddamn mafia." The words hung in the air between them, raw and ugly. Bruno didn't flinch. "Allegedly." "Don't." Stella's voice dropped. "Don't do that. Don't pretend we're playing some legal game where words matter more than truth. The truth." He set the tablet aside completely, giving her his full attention. "The truth is complicated. The truth is you hurt people. Sometimes." The casual admission was worse than a denial. Stella felt her stomach turn. "And I saved you." "Yes." "So what does that make me?" Bruno studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Someone who did her job. That's not enough. It's all you need to be." But it wasn't, and they both knew it. Stella had crossed some invisible line the moment she'd pressed her hands to his chest, and now she couldn't uncross it, couldn't unknow what she knew. "I want to transfer off your case," she said. "No." The single word landed like a command. Stella's spine straightened. "I'm not asking permission." "I know." Bruno's gaze never wavered. "But you're going to stay anyway." "Why would I?" "Because you're curious." He said it like a fact, not an accusation. Because you want to understand how someone like me exists in your world. Because part of you is already wondering if saving my life was a mistake or the most important thing you've ever done. Stella's breath caught. You don't know me. I know you didn't leave the room when Marco came. Most people would have run. You stayed. His voice softened just slightly. You're brave, and you don't realize it yet. Brave or stupid? Usually the same thing. Despite everything, despite the fear and anger and bone-deep unease, Stella almost smiled. Almost. She pushed away from the door, taking 2 steps closer. Not enough to reach him, but enough to close some of the distance. I looked you up, she said. Read about the restaurant, the warehouse fire, the men who disappeared. All alleged. All true. Bruno didn't deny it. If you're waiting for me to apologize for who I am, you'll be disappointed. I don't want an apology. Stella crossed her arms. I want to go back to 3 days ago when you were just a patient, just someone dying who needed help. You can't. I know. The admission hurt more than she expected. Bruno leaned forward slightly, and Stella saw him wince a crack in the controlled facade. He was still healing, still human beneath all the power and danger. I didn't ask for your help, he said quietly. But you gave it anyway. That's not something I forget. Is that a threat? It's gratitude. I don't want your gratitude. Then what do you want? The question caught her off guard. What did she want? To unhear his name? To unknow what he was? To stop feeling this pull toward someone she should be running from? I want to feel safe, she said finally. Bruno's expression shifted, something dark passing through his eyes. You're not safe, Stella. The use of her name sent ice down her spine. Because of you? Because of me. Because you saved me. Because my enemies don't care about innocence or intention. He held her gaze. You've been noticed. The room tilted slightly. What does that mean? It means the people who want me dead now know who you are. Bruno's voice stayed level, almost gentle, which made it worse. It means you can't unknow me, and I can't pretend you're invisible. Stella's hands clenched at her sides. So what happens now? Bruno studied her for a long moment, and in his eyes, she saw something that terrified her more than any threat could have. Possession. Now, he said softly, you let me protect you. The medication order came through at 11:47 p.m. Stella almost missed it. She'd been running between 3 patients, covering for Chen, who'd called in sick, her focus split between an elderly woman with pneumonia and a post-surgical patient whose drainage tube had kinked. Bruno's order appeared in the queue like any other pain management, standard dosage. Except it wasn't standard. Stella stared at the screen, her exhaustion evaporating as her brain kicked into the gear that had kept her patients alive for 3 years. Morphine sulfate 20 mg e purto push. 20 milligrams for someone Bruno's size, post-operative, wasn't unheard of. But he'd been on a lower dose all week, responding well. And more importantly, she pulled up his chart. His last dose had been 90 minutes ago. 2 doses that close together, at that strength, for someone still recovering from blood loss? That wasn't pain management. That was an overdose waiting to happen. Stella's hand hovered over the phone to call Dr. Reeves, then stopped. The order had Dr. Reeves' digital signature on it, but Dr. Reeves had left 2 hours ago. She'd seen him walk out. Her heart rate picked up. She looked at the hallway. The security guard who'd been stationed outside room 12 was gone. The second guard, the one who usually stood by the elevator, was also missing. Wrong. This is wrong. Stella moved on instinct, the kind of instinct that had saved lives before her brain caught up with the why. She grabbed the tablet and walked quickly toward room 12, her sneakers silent on the linoleum. The door was closed. She knocked once, soft, and entered without waiting for a response. Bruno was alone, eyes closed, his breathing even. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. Nothing looked different from her last check an hour ago, except the IV bag. It hung on the pole, clear fluid dripping through the line at a rate that made her stomach drop. Someone had already been here, already hung a new bag. Stella was across the room in 3 steps, her hands reaching for the line. "What are you doing?" Bruno's eyes were open, alert, tracking her movements. "Saving your life." Again. Stella clamped the line, stopping the flow. "Don't move." She checked the bag. No label. No pharmacy verification sticker. Nothing that marked it as hospital issued. "Oh God. Someone tried to poison you," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline screaming through her system. "This bag? It's not from pharmacy." Bruno's expression shifted, hardening into something cold and calculating. He sat up slowly, assessing, and reached for his phone. "Marco," he said when someone answered. "We have a problem." The hospital room flooded with people within minutes. Not hospital staff, Bruno's people. Marco swept in first, 2 others behind him, all moving with the efficiency of a practiced unit. They checked the IV bag, the room, the hallway, speaking in low voices that didn't carry. Stella stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the organized chaos and trying to process what had almost happened. She'd stopped it, caught it in time, but she'd almost been too late. Dr. Reeves arrived 20 minutes later, pulled from home, his face tight with fury when Marco showed him the fraudulent order. Hospital security came next, then administration, all of them speaking in urgent whispers outside the door. Through it all, Bruno watched Stella. She felt his gaze like a physical weight, but she didn't look at him, couldn't. If she looked at him, she'd have to acknowledge what she'd just done, how close he'd come to dying because of her. Because saving him once had made him a target. And her too. "Miss Arnold." She turned. Marco stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Castelli would like to speak with you. Alone." Stella glanced at Bruno, who gave a single nod. The room cleared silently, Marco the last to leave. He paused at the door. "Thank you," he said quietly. The words sounded unpracticed, like he didn't use them often. Then they were alone. Bruno swung his legs over the side of the bed, moving carefully but deliberately. "You caught it." "I almost didn't." Stella's voice came out rougher than intended. "If I'd been distracted for 5 more minutes..." "You weren't. That's not the point." "That's exactly the point." Bruno stood, steadier than he should have been, and took 2 steps toward her. "You notice things other people miss. That's why you're still alive." The words landed like a punch. "Is that what this is now?" Stella gestured at the room, the guards outside. The camera she'd noticed had appeared in the corner yesterday. "Survival? It's always been survival. You just didn't know it." Stella laughed, sharp and brittle. "Because I saved you. Because you were seen saving me." Bruno's gaze never wavered. "There's a difference." "Is there?" She pushed away from the window, anger finally breaking through the numbness. "Because from where I'm standing, they both end with me being a target." "No." His voice dropped, quiet but absolute. "They both end with you being protected." "I don't want protection. I want my life back." "You can't have it." The certainty in his voice made her want to scream. "You don't get to decide that." "I'm not deciding anything." Bruno moved closer, and Stella hated that she didn't step back. "I'm telling you what is. You're involved now, whether you like it or not. Because you won't let me leave. Because leaving won't make you safe." His expression softened just slightly, and somehow that was worse than the coldness. "They already know who you are, where you live, where you work. Disappearing now just makes you an easier target." Stella's breath caught. "You're watching me. I'm keeping you alive." "Same thing." "Not to me." They stood 3 feet apart, close enough that Stella could see the exhaustion Bruno was hiding, the pain he refused to acknowledge. Close enough that she felt the pull toward him that terrified her more than any threat. "I didn't ask for this," she said quietly. "I know. I want to go home. I want to sleep in my own bed without wondering who's watching. I want to walk to my car without looking over my shoulder. I can't give you that." "Then what can you give me?" Bruno held her gaze, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something in his eyes that looked almost like regret. "A chance to survive this," he said. "That's all." Stella's laugh came out broken. "That's not enough." "It's all I have." The admission hung between them, raw and honest in a way that made her chest ache. Marco knocked once, soft, then opened the door. "Security's been doubled. We've secured the floor. But," he glanced at Stella, "we should move her." "Move me?" Stella's head snapped toward him. "Move me? Where?" "Somewhere safer," Bruno said. "I'm not going anywhere." "Yes, you are." His tone left no room for argument. "As of now, you don't go anywhere alone. Not home, not work, not the cafeteria. You can't." "I can, and I am." Bruno's expression hardened. "Someone tried to kill me through you tonight. Do you understand what that means? It means they'll use you again, and next time, they won't be subtle." Stella felt the walls closing in. "So what? I'm a prisoner now? You're protected." "It feels like the same thing." Bruno stepped closer, near enough that she could feel the heat of him, see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost gentle, which made the words cut deeper. "You don't get to be alone anymore." Stella requested a schedule change on Monday morning. She didn't ask Bruno, didn't tell Marco. She walked into the charge nurse's office at 6 a.m. with a formal transfer request, different floor, different shift, anything that would put distance between her and room 12. "Personal reasons," she said when Janet asked why. Janet looked at her over reading glasses that had slipped down her nose. "This about the Castelli patient?" Stella's silence was answer enough. "Request denied." Janet handed the form back. "Administration's orders. You're his primary nurse until discharge." "Since when does administration assign primary nurses?" "Since they started getting calls from lawyers." Janet's expression softened slightly. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but whatever this is, it's above my pay grade." "And yours." Stella crumpled the form in her fist and walked out. She made it to the parking garage before the anger gave way to something worse. Fear. The kind that lived in her chest and whispered that her life wasn't hers anymore. You don't get to be alone anymore. She sat in her car for 10 minutes before driving to work, and the whole time she felt eyes on her. She checked the rearview mirror. A black sedan sat 3 spaces behind her, engine idling, windows tinted dark, watching. By Wednesday, Stella had mapped out her invisible cage. The security guard who appeared outside her apartment building, the unmarked car that followed her to the gym, the way conversations stopped when she walked into the break room, like people had been warned not to talk about her. She was a ghost in her own life. Bruno had been moved to a private recovery suite still in the hospital, but isolated, controlled. Stella checked on him twice a day because she had no choice, and each time he watched her with that same unnerving awareness. "You're angry," he said on Thursday afternoon. Stella didn't look up from adjusting his medication. Observant as always. "You tried to transfer." Her hands stilled. "How did you—" "I know everything that happens to you." The casual admission made her stomach turn. "That's not comforting. It's not meant to be." Bruno sat up slightly, wincing. He was healing faster than he should, stubborn even in recovery. "It's meant to keep you alive. I don't need—" "Yes, you do." His voice cut through hers, quiet but absolute. "Whether you accept it or not." Stella finally met his eyes. "I want my life back." "I know." "Then let me go." "I can't." The honesty in his voice broke something in her chest. Because he wasn't lying, wasn't manipulating. He meant it. She was trapped, and they both knew it. The message came Friday night. Stella found it tucked under her windshield wiper after her shift, a plain white envelope, no marking, no name. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a single photograph. Her apartment. Taken from across the street, her living room window visible, curtains open. She could see herself in the frame, blurred but recognizable, sitting on her couch with a book. No words, no threats. It didn't need them. Stella's breath stopped. She looked around the parking garage, suddenly aware of how empty it was, how dark the corners were, how many places someone could hide. Her phone was in her hand before she thought about it. Marco's number already pulled up. Bruno had made her save it. In case, he'd said. This was the case. Marco answered on the first ring. Miss Arnold. Someone left. Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat, forced steadiness. There's a photo. On my car. Where are you? Hospital. Level 3 parking. Don't move. The line went dead. 2 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up beside her, and Marco stepped out with 2 others. He took the photograph without asking, studied it with an expression that revealed nothing. Get in the car, he said. I have my own... Now. Stella got in. They didn't take her home. The SUV drove through the city with the practiced efficiency of people who knew how to avoid being followed. Stella sat in the back seat, watching streetlights blur past, her heart rate refusing to settle. Where are we going? She finally asked. Somewhere safe, Marco said from the front seat. That's not an answer. It's the only one you need. 20 minutes later, they pulled into an underground garage attached to a building Stella didn't recognize. High-rise, expensive, the kind of place that had doormen and security cameras in every corner. Marco led her to an elevator that required a key card. They rode up in silence. The doors opened directly into a penthouse. Bruno stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, back to the door, phone pressed to his ear. He was dressed now dark slacks, white shirt, still moving carefully but no longer the patient she'd saved. He looked different here. Dangerous in a way the hospital had muted. He ended the call when he saw her. Show me, he said to Marco. Marco handed him the photograph. Bruno's expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted. Went cold and sharp. How long ago? His voice was controlled. Too controlled. 20 minutes. Bruno looked at Stella, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Fury, barely leashed. You're staying here tonight, he said. Stella's laugh came out sharp. I'm not... This isn't a negotiation. Bruno crossed to her in 3 strides, and suddenly he was close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw, the restraint it took not to what? Rage? Destroy something? Someone photographed you, he said quietly. Inside your apartment. Do you understand what that means? It means they're trying to scare me. It means they can reach you whenever they want. His hand lifted, almost touched her face, then dropped. And I can't allow that. Stella's breath caught at the barely there contact. You can't control everything. I can control this. By locking me in a cage? By keeping you breathing. Bruno's voice dropped lower, and Stella felt the words more than heard them. I won't negotiate your safety, Stella. Not even with you. Marco cleared his throat. We should tell her. Bruno's jaw tightened. Tell me what? Stella looked between them. Marco's expression stayed neutral. The photograph. It wasn't taken by Rossini's people. Then who? Someone inside, Bruno said. His voice carried a weight that made her stomach drop. Someone who knows where you live because I told them to watch you. The room tilted. Stella took a step back. You mean one of your people did this? Yes. The single word hit like a physical blow. Someone you trust, she said slowly, each word careful. Someone protecting me. They're the threat. Bruno's expression hardened into something carved from stone. Not anymore. The promise in those 3 words was more terrifying than any threat. Stella wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm apartment. What does that mean? Bruno held her gaze, and in his eyes, she saw the man the city feared, the one who made people disappear without headlines or questions. It means, he said quietly, I'm going to find out who betrayed me, and when I do... He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Stella didn't sleep. She lay in Bruno's guest room, all modern furniture and impersonal luxury, staring at the ceiling while the city hummed 20 floors below. The sheets were expensive, the bed comfortable, but none of it mattered. Someone Bruno trusted had threatened her, and Bruno was going to make them disappear. She'd seen it in his eyes, heard it in the silence that followed his unfinished sentence. This was the world she'd stumbled into, where betrayal ended in quiet violence and people vanished without trials or explanations. I should be horrified, she thought. The problem was, part of her wasn't. Part of her felt safer knowing Bruno would eliminate the threat, that he'd burn down his own organization to keep her protected. That's what scared her most. Morning came gray and cold. Stella found Bruno in the kitchen, coffee already made, dressed in dark slacks and a black shirt that made him look like exactly what he was. He'd been on the phone when she appeared, speaking in rapid Italian, but ended the call immediately. Coffee? He offered. Information, Stella said. Bruno's mouth almost curved. Almost. He poured her a cup anyway, black, no sugar he'd remembered from the hospital. The man who took the photograph was named Luca, he said without preamble. He worked for me for 6 years, trusted position, access to everything. Is, Bruno corrected himself, leaning against the counter. For now. Stella wrapped her hands around the warm mug. What are you going to do to him? What needs to be done? That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you. His dark eyes met hers. If I tell you details, you become complicit. I won't do that to you. I'm already complicit. I saved your life. That makes you innocent. Bruno's voice stayed level. What happens next doesn't. The distinction felt paper-thin. Stella took a long drink of coffee, using the bitter heat to ground herself. Why did he do it? Betray you? Money, fear, ambition. Bruno shrugged slightly. Does it matter? It matters to him. Not to me. The coldness in his tone should have sent her running. Instead, Stella moved closer, setting her mug on the counter between them. You don't feel anything? She asked. About someone you trusted for 6 years turning on you? Something flickered in Bruno's expression. I feel plenty. I just don't let it change the outcome. That sounds lonely. It keeps people alive. He held her gaze. The ones who matter. The implication settled between them, heavy and undeniable. Don't, Stella said quietly. Don't what? Don't make me matter. Her voice cracked slightly. Don't make this about protecting me when we both know what you're really doing. Bruno straightened, and the distance between them felt suddenly smaller. What am I doing? Proving a point, to whoever's watching. That I'm yours to protect. She forced herself to hold his gaze. That threatening me means death. Yes. The admission was worse than a lie would have been. That's not protection, Stella said. That's ownership. No. Bruno's voice dropped. Ownership would be forcing you to stay here, forcing you to accept my world without question. He stepped closer, just one step, but it felt like gravity shifting. I'm giving you the truth. What you do with it is your choice. Is it? Because it doesn't feel like I have choices anymore. You have one. His expression softened just slightly. You can hate me for what I'm about to do. Most people would. Stella's breath caught. And if I don't? Then we'll both have to live with what that means. Marco came at noon. Stella heard the door open, heard the low voices in Italian, and knew without being told that something had changed. She stayed in the living room, pretending to read a book she hadn't turned a page of in an hour. Bruno appeared in the doorway 10 minutes later. It's done, he said simply. Stella's hands tightened on the book. What's done? The betrayal's been handled. You're safe now. The words should have brought relief. Instead, Stella felt something cold settle in her chest. Is he dead? Bruno's silence was answer enough. No, he said finally. But he's no longer a threat. To you or anyone else. Stella set the book aside carefully, her hands needing something to do. Where is he? Gone. That's not. It's all you need to know. Bruno crossed to her, moving with that predatory grace she'd noticed in the hospital but hadn't understood then. He's alive. He won't touch you. That's the only information that matters. It matters to me how you— I didn't torture him. Bruno's voice stayed level. I didn't hurt him beyond what was necessary. I made him understand that certain lines can't be crossed. And then he left the city. Permanently. Stella searched his face for signs of violence, for guilt or satisfaction, or anything that would tell her what necessary meant. But Bruno's expression remained controlled, giving nothing away. You're not going to tell me, she said. No, because you're protecting me. Yes, Stella laughed, sharp and bitter. From the truth about who you are? From having to decide if you can live with it. Bruno sat down across from her, close enough to touch but maintaining careful distance. I know what I am, Stella. I've known for a long time. You don't need to carry that weight. What if I want to? The question hung between them, dangerous and honest. Bruno's expression shifted, something vulnerable, breaking through the control. Why would you want that? Because— Stella stopped, not sure how to finish. Because she'd seen him vulnerable in the hospital. Because he'd let her choose to stay when he could have forced her. Because somewhere between saving his life and being pulled into his world, she'd stopped seeing him as a monster. And that terrified her. I don't know, she said finally. Bruno studied her for a long moment, then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a plain envelope. Marco brought this, he said, setting it on the coffee table between them. New identity. Clean background. Apartment in another city, already paid for 6 months. Job reference at a hospital 3 states away. Stella stared at the envelope like it might bite. You're letting me go. I'm giving you the option. Bruno's voice stayed quiet. No one will follow you. No one will know where you went. You'll be safe. And you? I'll handle the rest of the threat here. Make sure no one else comes looking. Stella's hands trembled. Whenever you want. Tonight, if you choose. She picked up the envelope, feeling its weight. A new life. A clean slate. Everything she'd wanted 3 days ago when the photograph appeared on her windshield. Freedom. So why did it feel like loss? What if I stay? The question escaped before she could stop it. Bruno's expression went very still. Then, you stay knowing what I am. What I do. The cost of being in my world. He leaned forward slightly. No illusions, Stella. No pretending I'm something I'm not. I'm not asking you to change. Then what are you asking? Stella met his eyes, and for the first time since this started, she let herself be honest. I'm asking if there's room in your world for someone who sees all of it and stays anyway. Bruno's breath caught barely visible, but she saw it. There's room, he said quietly. But once you choose this, there's no going back. Stella looked at the envelope in her hands. Safety, distance, a life where she'd never have to wonder who was watching or what lines were being crossed in her name. Then she looked at Bruno and realized she'd already made her choice. She just didn't know if she could live with it yet. I need time, she said. How much? I don't know. Bruno nodded slowly, standing. The offer doesn't expire. Take whatever time you need. He turned to leave, and Stella's voice stopped him. Bruno. He looked back. Thank you, she said, for giving me the choice. Something in his expression softened. You saved my life, Stella. The least I can do is let you decide what to do with yours. Then he left, and Stella sat alone with an envelope that offered everything she'd wanted and nothing she needed. Stella packed her apartment on Sunday. Not everything. Just enough to disappear clothes, photos, the nursing textbooks she'd kept from school, the essentials of a life she could carry in 2 suitcases. The black sedan sat across the street, engine idling. Bruno's people, still watching, even now, even when she'd told Marco she needed space to think. She'd opened the envelope that morning. Read the new name, the new address, the carefully forged documents that would give her a clean slate. Sarah Mitchell, trauma nurse, Denver, Colorado. A stranger's life, ready and waiting. All you have to do is take it. Her phone buzzed. A single message from Bruno. Marco says you're packing. Stella stared at the screen, then typed back. Is that a problem? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. No, it's your choice. She waited for more, for an argument, for pressure, for the possessive control she'd expected. But nothing else came. He meant it. He was letting her go. That made it worse. Bruno's penthouse felt different when she arrived that afternoon. Quieter, emptier. Like he'd already accepted her decision and hollowed out the space she'd occupied. He stood by the windows again, wearing the same dark slacks and black shirt, looking out at the city he controlled. He didn't turn when she entered. I'm leaving tomorrow, Stella said. I know. Marco told you. Marco tells me everything. Bruno's voice stayed level, giving nothing away. He's good at his job. Stella crossed to the window, standing beside him but not close enough to touch. The city spread out below them, thousands of lives, all moving in patterns they couldn't see. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. What? This life. The choices that brought you here. Bruno considered the question. Regret implies I had better options. I didn't. Everyone has options. Not in my world. He finally turned to look at her. You're born into certain families, certain obligations. By the time you're old enough to understand what you're part of, it's already too late to leave. But you became the boss. That was a choice. Yes. Something dark flickered in his eyes. And I made it so no one else would have to. The admission surprised her. What do you mean? My father believed in violence as education, fear as loyalty. Bruno's jaw tightened. I watched him destroy people for minor infractions. Watched him enjoy it. When he died, I had a choice. Continue his legacy or change it. So you chose control instead of chaos. I chose survival. For everyone. He held her gaze. I'm not a good man, Stella. I've done things that would make you leave this room and never look back. But I'm better than what came before me. That has to count for something. It did. God help her, it did. Stella looked back at the city. I could have a normal life. In Denver. Sarah Mitchell doesn't know you exist. No, she doesn't. She's safe. Yes. Smart choice. The smartest, Bruno agreed. They stood in silence, and Stella felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her chest. This was it, the moment she could walk away with his blessing and never look back. So, why couldn't she move toward the door? What happens if I stay? The question came out quieter than she intended. Bruno's expression shifted something careful, guarded. You already know the answer. Tell me anyway. You stay in my world, under my protection, always watched, always at risk because of who I am and what I do. His voice dropped. You'll see things you can't unsee, know things you can't unknow. And one day, you'll wake up and realize you've become someone Sarah Mitchell could never be. Is that what you want? What I want doesn't matter. It matters to me. Bruno stepped closer, just one step, and Stella's breath caught. If I tell you what I want, it takes the choice away, and I won't do that to you. Why not? Stella turned to face him fully. Everyone else in your life doesn't get choices. Why do I? Because you saved my life without knowing what it would cost you. His hand lifted, almost touched her face, then dropped. Because you stayed in that hospital room when you should have run. Because you're the first person in 10 years who looked at me and saw something worth saving. The words hit her like a physical blow. Bruno, you should go, he said quietly, before I give you reasons to stay that have nothing to do with safety or logic. Stella's heart hammered. What if I want those reasons? You don't. Don't tell me what I want. They stood inches apart now, close enough that she could see the restraint it took for him not to close the distance. Close enough that she felt the pull between them like gravity. Sarah Mitchell deserves a normal life, Bruno said, and I can't give you that. I know. Then why are you still here? Stella opened her mouth to answer, and her phone rang. The sound shattered the moment. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Don't answer it, Bruno said, his tone shifting immediately. But Stella's instincts were already screaming. She answered, Miss Arnold. The voice was smooth, unfamiliar, carrying a faint accent. I hope I'm not interrupting. Who is this? Someone who's been watching you. Closely. A pause. You've become quite important to Mr. Castelli, haven't you? Bruno's expression went cold. He made a sharp gesture keep him talking. What do you want? Stella asked, her voice steadier than her hands. Just to deliver a message. You have two options, walk away tonight and we'll forget you exist. Or stay, the voice hardened. And become the example we use to remind Castelli that no one is untouchable. The line went dead. Stella's hands shook as she lowered the phone. Bruno was already moving, phone to his ear, speaking rapid Italian to Marco. How did they get this number? Stella's voice came out thin. They've been planning this. Bruno's jaw tightened, waiting to see what you'd choose. So there is no neutral ground. There never was. The truth settled over her like cold water. The envelope, the new identity, the clean exit, all of it had been an illusion, a test, not from Bruno, but from his enemies. They'd been watching, waiting, and now they were forcing her hand. Bruno ended his call, his expression carved from stone. Marco's mobilizing security. We're moving you somewhere safer. No? He stopped. Stella. No more running. She stepped toward him instead of the door, her decision crystallizing with sudden, terrifying clarity. No more hiding. No more pretending I can walk away from this. You still can. We'll get you out. I don't want out. The words came out fierce, final. I want to stay. Bruno's expression shifted shock, relief, and something darker all at once. You don't know what you're choosing. Yes, I do. Stella closed the distance between them, her heart hammering but her voice steady. I'm choosing the man who gave me a choice when he could have taken it. I'm choosing the world that's been mine since the moment I saved your life. She held his gaze. I'm choosing you. The words hung in the air between them. Bruno's control cracked just for a second, just enough that she saw the want beneath it. There's no going back from this, he said quietly. I know. They'll come for you. Let them. Stella. I'm staying. She said it with finality, with certainty, with the knowledge that Sarah Mitchell had just died and someone else entirely was being born. Whatever that means. Whatever it costs. Bruno's hand finally touched her face, gentle, reverent, like she was something precious he couldn't believe he was allowed to hold. Then you're mine to protect, he said. Completely. I was always going to be. Stella's smile came sad and knowing. We both knew it. His thumb traced her cheekbone, and for one suspended moment, the world narrowed to just this, his touch, her choice, the irrevocable line they were crossing. Then his phone rang again. Marco's name lit up the screen. Bruno answered, his hand still on Stella's face. What? Whatever Marco said made his expression go cold and deadly. Where? A pause. How many? Stella's stomach dropped. Bruno ended the call, his touch withdrawing as he shifted into the man who ruled the city through calculated violence. They're moving now, he said. Coming here. How long do we have? 10 minutes, maybe less. He cupped her face with both hands, his eyes burning into hers. You can still leave. Marco can get you out the back. No? Stella. I chose this. She covered his hands with hers. I chose you. So, whatever happens next, we face it together. Bruno's expression cracked open raw emotion, breaking through the control for just a second. Then, he kissed her. Not gentle, not tentative, like he was claiming something he'd been holding back from since the moment their eyes met in the ER. And Stella kissed him back, sealing her choice with her body since words weren't enough. When they broke apart, both breathless, Bruno pressed his forehead to hers. No going back, he whispered. No going back, she agreed. Outside, the city held its breath, and Stella Arnold became someone new. The penthouse transformed in minutes. Marco arrived with 4 others, all moving with military precision. Guns appeared discreet, professional, the kind of weapons that didn't announce themselves. Bruno issued orders in rapid Italian, his entire demeanor shifting into something Stella had only glimpsed before. This was the man the city feared. How many? Bruno asked Marco. 6, confirmed, Rossini's best. Marco's expression stayed neutral. They're coming quiet. No explosions, no attention, just elimination. Expected. They'll try for the service entrance and the elevator simultaneously. Bruno nodded once, his mind already working through scenarios Stella couldn't see. His hand stayed on her lower back, grounding, possessive, like he needed the contact to think clearly. Stella needs to be in the safe room, Marco said. No. Bruno's voice cut through the room. Sir, she stays with me. Marco's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Whatever he saw in Bruno's expression ended the debate. Stella should have been terrified, should have been questioning every choice that led to this moment, standing in a luxury penthouse while armed men prepared for violence she couldn't see but knew was coming. Instead, she felt strangely calm. What can I do? She asked. Bruno turned to her, surprise flickering across his features. You don't need to. I'm not hiding while you handle this. Stella kept her voice steady. I'm a trauma nurse. If someone gets hurt, I'm the most useful person in this room. Something in Bruno's expression shifted respect, maybe, or recognition that she meant it. Marco, he said, not taking his eyes off Stella. Medical supplies. Everything she might need. Marco disappeared and returned with a tactical medical kit that looked military grade. Stella opened it, her hands moving through familiar territory, gauze, tourniquets, field dressings, trauma shears. This'll work, she said. Bruno's hand cupped her face briefly. Stay behind me, always. I will. I mean it, Stella. Whatever happens. I know. She covered his hand with hers. I trust you. The words landed between them, heavy with meaning. Then the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately dim, red-tinted, casting everything in shadows. South elevator, Marco said quietly, his voice coming through an earpiece. 2 men, 4th floor and climbing. Bruno moved to the window, scanning the street below. The others? Service entrance, 4 confirmed. Split attention. Bruno's voice stayed level, analytical. They're hoping we focus on one entry point and miss the other. Standard Rossini tactics. Which means they're predictable. Bruno turned to his men. Let them think it's working. Orders were issued in Italian, quick, efficient. 3 men moved toward the service entrance. 1 stayed by the elevator. Marco positioned himself between Bruno and the apartment door. And Stella stood behind Bruno, medical kit ready, her nurse's instincts cataloging exit routes and injury patterns before anything even happened. They won't reach this floor, Bruno said quietly, meant for her. But if they do, I'll be ready. His hand found hers in the darkness, squeezed once, then released. The elevator dinged softly. Stella's heart rate spiked, but she stayed still, breathing through it the way she'd learned during codes in the ER. Fear was information, not instruction. The elevator doors opened. Nothing. Empty. Marco moved forward cautiously, checking the corners, his weapon trained on the shadows. Clear, he said. Too clear, Bruno murmured. Then the window shattered. Not explosively, someone had cut it, quiet and professional. A figure swung through on a rope, already moving before he landed, gun raised. Marco fired twice. The man dropped. Stella's hands were already moving toward the medical kit, but Bruno's arm blocked her. He's theirs, he said quietly. Not yours to save. The distinction felt important. Final. More gunfire erupted from the service entrance, muffled, brief. Then, silence. Marco's earpiece crackled. A voice spoke in Italian, rapid and efficient. 4 down, Marco translated. 2 wounded, 2 dead. Bruno nodded once. The 6th? Still looking. Then he's the real threat. Bruno's eyes scanned the apartment, calculating. The others were distraction. Stella's mind raced. If they sent 5 as distraction, the 6th would be the one who actually knows what he's doing, Bruno finished. They moved together toward the interior of the penthouse, away from windows and obvious entry points. Marco flanked them, weapon ready. Where would you come in? Stella asked quietly. If you were him? Bruno glanced at her, something like approval in his eyes. Somewhere unexpected. Somewhere we've already cleared. The elevator. Too obvious. The safe room, Marco said suddenly. Bruno's expression went cold. He's already inside. They moved fast, Bruno leading, Marco covering, Stella between them with her medical kit because stopping to secure her somewhere would waste time they didn't have. The safe room door stood open. It shouldn't have been. Bruno entered first, weapon drawn, moving with practiced efficiency that came from years of surviving exactly this kind of threat. A man stood by the window, older, gray-haired, expensive suit, gun held casually at his side. Not Rossini's soldier. Rossini himself. Bruno. The name came out smooth, almost friendly. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten about me. I don't forget threats. No, you eliminate them. Rossini's smile didn't reach his eyes. Usually. But you've been distracted lately. His gaze slid to Stella. Bruno shifted slightly, putting himself between them. This is between us. Is it? Rossini tilted his head. Because from where I stand, you've developed a weakness. And weakness in our world. She's not my weakness. Then, prove it. Rossini raised his gun, not at Bruno. At Stella. Walk away. Leave her. Show me you're still the man who runs this city through fear, not sentiment. The room held its breath. Bruno's expression stayed cold, controlled, giving nothing away. But his hand, the one not holding his weapon, reached back and found Stella's. Squeezed once. Trust me. No, Bruno said simply. Rossini's smile faded. Then you've already lost. Have I? Bruno's voice dropped, deadly quiet. You sent 6 men to kill one. You're standing in my home, alone, trying to make a point with a gun you won't fire. Because if you do, if you hurt her, every ally you have disappears, every protection you've built crumbles, and I will spend every remaining day of your life making you regret that moment. Rossini's hand trembled slightly. She's not my weakness, Bruno continued. She's the reason I'll destroy you completely, instead of offering mercy. The words hung in the air. Then Rossini lowered his gun. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is. Bruno's voice carried absolute finality. You came to prove I was weak. Instead, you proved you're desperate. Everyone will know that by morning. Rossini's jaw tightened, but he holstered his weapon, raising his hands in surrender. Marco moved forward, disarming him efficiently. Take him out the back, Bruno said. Make sure he understands the consequences of returning. And the others? Clean it up, quietly. Marco nodded and escorted Rossini out, leaving Bruno and Stella alone in the safe room. The silence felt heavier than the gunfire. Stella's hands shook as adrenaline finally caught up with her. You didn't choose. No, Bruno turned to her, his expression softening just slightly. I chose you. A long time ago. When? The moment you told me to stay with you in the ER, like I was worth saving. He stepped closer, his hand cupping her face. Everyone else in my life wants something: power, money, protection. You just wanted me to live. Stella's breath caught. Bruno, I need to ask you something. His thumb traced her cheekbone. And I need you to think before you answer. Okay. Stay with me. Not as someone I protect, not as someone who saved my life. His eyes held hers, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. Stay as my partner, in everything. Stella's heart hammered. What does that mean? It means you see my world completely. The decisions I make, the actions I take. It means I trust you with things I've never trusted anyone. He paused. And it means when I move against threats like Rossini, you stand beside me instead of behind me. As equals, yes. Stella searched his face, seeing the man beneath the reputation, the one who'd let her choose when he could have forced her hand, who'd given her every chance to leave, who'd stood between her and a gun without hesitation. I'm not like you, she said quietly. I don't think like you. I won't always agree with your choices. I know, and I'll tell you when I think you're wrong. I'm counting on it. Then yes. Stella stepped into him, her hands on his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath her palms. I'll stay. As your partner. Bruno's expression cracked open relief, gratitude, something deeper he couldn't quite name. He kissed her again, slower this time, like he was memorizing the moment. When they broke apart, Stella smiled. So what happens now? Now, Bruno said, his hand lacing with hers, we rebuild. The city quieted after Rossini. Not immediately. First came the careful dismantling. Alliances shifted, territories redistributed, messages sent through channels Stella was learning to recognize. Bruno worked from the penthouse, phone calls in Italian punctuated by meetings with men in expensive suits who looked at her with cautious respect. She'd become visible, acknowledged. The woman who stood beside Bruno Castelli. Stella went back to work 3 days later. Not the same hospital. Bruno had arranged a transfer to a private facility, better security, less exposure, but the work was the same. Trauma, emergency. The controlled chaos she'd always thrived in. The difference was the black sedan that followed her, the guard who appeared in the parking garage, the way other staff gave her space. Like she carried something dangerous they couldn't quite name. She did. She carried Bruno's world on her shoulders now, and everyone could see it. How does it feel? Chen asked during a rare quiet moment in the break room. Stella considered the question. Stirring cold coffee she wouldn't drink. Different. Good different? Necessary different. Chen studied her with the kind of assessment that came from years of reading patients. You're not scared anymore. I'm terrified. Stella met her eyes. I'm just not running from it. Bruno was waiting when she got home. Not the penthouse Stella had kept her apartment, insisted on it actually. Some part of her needed the reminder that she'd chosen this life rather than had it chosen for her. But he'd upgraded the security, added cameras, reinforced the door, stationed Marco's people in rotations she'd stopped trying to track. He sat on her couch like he belonged there, laptop open, phone discarded beside him. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression softened. Long shift? He asked. Aren't they all? Stella dropped her bag by the door, kicked off her shoes. You didn't have to wait. I wanted to. The admission still surprised her, these small vulnerabilities he offered like gifts. She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. Bruno's hand found hers automatically, their fingers lacing together in a gesture that had become habit. Marco says you handled a situation at the hospital, Bruno said carefully. Stella tensed. It wasn't. A patient's family member got aggressive, started making threats when you wouldn't let him into the ICU during restricted hours. Bruno's thumb traced circles on her palm. You talked him down, alone, before security arrived. That's my job. Your job is nursing, not negotiating with violent men. I grew up in ERs, Bruno. Violent men are part of the territory. She squeezed his hand. Besides, he wasn't actually violent, just scared. His daughter was dying, and he needed someone to see him. And you did. Yes. Bruno was quiet for a moment. Most people in my world would have had him removed, maybe worse. I'm not most people in your world. No. He turned to face her fully. You're not. That's why this works. Stella's breath caught at the acknowledgement not of love, not yet, but of partnership, of balance. Does it work? She asked quietly. Really? What do you think? I think. Stella paused, gathering words for something she'd been feeling but hadn't named. I think I'm different now. I make different choices, see the world differently. She met his eyes. That should terrify me. But it doesn't. It does. Just not enough to leave. Bruno's expression cracked open slightly. Gratitude, relief, something deeper. You could still. No, I couldn't. Stella shifted closer. That option disappeared the moment I chose you over safety. We both know it. Regret? Some days. Honesty felt important between them. Some days I miss being someone who didn't know your world existed, who could walk through the city without checking shadows, who saved lives without wondering about the consequences. And other days? Stella smiled, small but real. Other days I realize I was always meant to find you. That saving your life was the first real choice I ever made. Bruno's hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone in the gesture that had become uniquely his. You make me want to be better. Better how? Less violent, more strategic. His voice dropped. More careful with the power I have because I see how you look at me when I misuse it. I don't judge you. You do. You just do it quietly. Bruno's smile came sad and knowing, and I'm grateful for it. Someone should. They sat in the comfortable silence that came from trust rather than words. Outside, the city hummed with life. Millions of people who had no idea the man who controlled half of it sat on a worn couch in a modest apartment, choosing peace over power for a few stolen hours. The board wants to meet you, Bruno said eventually. Stella stiffened. Your board? The people who run the organization. They want to understand who you are, why I've changed how I operate. Changed how? I've been more measured lately, less reactive, more willing to negotiate before eliminating threats. He held her gaze. They think you've made me weak. Have I? You've made me careful. There's a difference. Stella considered this. What happens if they don't approve? They don't get a vote. Bruno's voice carried absolute finality. You're not a business decision, Stella. You're my choice. They can accept it or leave. And if they choose to leave, then I rebuild without them. He said it simply, like dismantling his empire for her was a foregone conclusion. Bruno. I mean it. He shifted to face her fully, both hands cupping her face now. Everything I've built, every alliance I've made, every decision I've taken, none of it matters if you're not safe. If we're not together. That's not rational? Strategic? Bruno's smile came sharp. No, it's not, but you made me believe some things matter more than power. Stella's chest ached with the weight of his words. What things? Being seen, being known. His forehead pressed to hers. Being saved by someone who had no reason to care whether I lived or died, and choosing to anyway. I'm a nurse. It's what I do. No. Bruno's voice dropped to almost a whisper. You're the woman who stayed when everyone else would have run. Who looked at my world and chose to be part of it anyway. Who makes me want to be someone worth saving. Stella's breath caught. You were always worth saving. You're the only person who's ever believed that. The admission broke something open between them, the last wall either of them had been holding on to. Stella kissed him, soft and certain, sealing promises neither of them had words for yet. When they broke apart, Bruno's expression carried a vulnerability she'd rarely seen. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. This, us. I know power, control, strategy. But this, you don't have to know. Stella's hand covered his heart. We'll figure it out together. And if I make mistakes? Then I'll tell you. She smiled. Loudly. Bruno's laugh came surprised and genuine. I'm counting on it. They sat together as the city darkened beyond her windows, two people who'd found each other in blood and chaos and chosen to stay anyway. What happens now? Stella asked eventually. Now we live. Bruno's hand laced with hers. Carefully, strategically, together. That simple? That complicated. He lifted her hand to his lips. But I'll take complicated with you over simple with anyone else. Stella leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence, the steady rhythm of his breathing. This wasn't a fairy tale. There would be more threats, more danger, more moments where she'd question every choice that led her here. But there would also be this quiet moments where the most dangerous man in the city chose softness, where the woman who saved him became the reason he changed how he wielded power. "You saved my life once," Bruno said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of everything unsaid between them. Stella looked up at him, seeing the man beneath the reputation vulnerable, certain, irrevocably hers. "I won't waste it," he finished. The promise hung in the air between them, not of forever, not of safety, but of intention, of choice, of a man who'd been given a second chance and the woman who'd become his reason to deserve it. And somewhere in the complicated, dangerous, impossible space between them, that was enough. Stella Arnold stayed. Not because she had to, not because Bruno forced her hand, but because saving his life in that ER had been the first truly honest thing she'd ever done, and everything that followed was just living with the consequences of choosing truth over safety. The city never knew her name, but Bruno did, and in his world, that made her untouchable. That made her his. That made them both something neither of them had been before. Dangerously, irrevocably alive.